You don't seem to have even the guts to do that. If you say you believe in equal opportunity, you're a hypocrite. This college is privilege.
In this video, we're going to watch Dinesh D'Souza debating a student that is arguing for reparations. And the reason why I want to cover this video is because Dinesh does a great job here of asking some prodding questions and backing the guy into a corner before going for the KO. So be sure to stick around until the end for that, because I'm going to explain exactly how Dinesh puts this guy into checkmate. Let's get into the clip.
After World War II, the white middle class soared to prosperity as a result of bills like the GI Bill. And African Americans who were coming home from war didn't get those benefits simply because they were African American. The U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs denied African Americans access to those benefits simply because of their race. And you are correct in saying that no one today dealt with that particular issue. With that being said, however, there was wealth amassed as a result of those programs that still exists today. And when I think of your example about an individual who works as a janitor and sees people dining in a beautiful cafe walking home from work, I want to ask you, do you think any of that indignation, given certain circumstances, might actually be justified simply because there have been systematic blocks in people's way throughout American history, not ending with slavery, not ending with the Jim Crow laws, not ending, some would say even today, we still have housing discrimination, all of which is to say, you found that during the Cold War era, there was a massive boom in the white middle class's prosperity, and you just didn't have that among African Americans, not because they weren't meritorious, but because they were discriminated against.
So, let me ask, you know, we're in a very smart college. It's worth pursuing a discussion on these points. So there are Americans whose present benefits are due to past advantage. By the way, this past advantage, which is often assumed to continue with the white man, actually goes all the way back to the beginning. The American Indians who were here first, right, had a huge advantage. We presume that they owned the whole country. Now, by the way, let's pause for a moment. How do you get to own a country? If you have Cain and Abel is a shepherd, and Cain is a farmer, and Cain says, okay, I'm not going to put a fence around the whole world. I own it, because I'm the only guy here. You're a shepherd. And my descendants will now inherit the earth, and anybody who shows up is a usurper. Rousseau says that the first guy who puts up a fence and claims he owns something is a con man. So the American Indians came. They happened to be first. They came in a bunch of tribes. The Navajos who got the land took it from the Hopi or the Pueblo. Their law of the jungle was conquest. That's how they got the land. There's a big fight about the Black Hills that I cover in the film. The Sioux who got the Black Hills took it from the Cheyenne. So when we say, oh, give us the land back, are you going to turn around and give it back to the Cheyenne? Oh, no. It's ours. Really? How come you own it forever now? So what I'm getting at here is history is very complicated. Let me give you an example of India so we can look at this at the level of theory. Okay? India was invaded by the British, and earlier by the Afghans and the Persians and the Mongols. So you have all these successive invasions, right?
Observe the behavior of this professor at the bottom left of the screen throughout the debate. She is literally unhinged and acting like an overly involved and overly emotional helicopter parent at their child's game. But Dinesh is right on the money here. History is a tale of war and conquest, punctuated by brief moments of peace. We just happen to be living in a rather peaceful time at the moment. Literally since the dawn of time, our ancestors have been messing each other up and stealing each other's shit. This is how human beings are wired, and the thought of wanting to make up for past injustices by paying money to people now who never experienced said injustices is just mind-bendingly stupid. And it's an idea that only really gets discussed amongst academics and then amongst the students that they brainwash. There is more human suffering and injustice in today's world than you could possibly conceive of or imagine. There are so many places that you could put all of that energy into helping people. But looking back at the past and self-flagellating is just such a typical typical thing for spoilt Westerners to do. Now watch here as Dinesh D'Souza sticks behind the jab and starts to pick his arguments apart.
Are you actually saying that you believe in a rule of social justice today that says globally, let's look at this as a global rule of justice, I'm going to figure out whose ancestors did what to whom, and I'm going to return goods that were illicitly taken from the beginning to the people who had it originally? Do you believe that that's a viable way to organize our society? Do you believe, if I can ask you a direct question, that you are the beneficiary of white privilege here at Amherst?
I
Yes
do,
or no?
Well, yeah, and
Pause.
Okay.
If you are, can I ask you a further question?
Okay, yeah, but I don't just say it in a I don't say it in a self-flagellating and self-aggrandizing way.
Hold on. Okay, go on.
You know, I really try not to. I'm simply saying that because you asked me. Really, I view the recognition of one's privilege as an impetus to change things. So I don't just say I have white privilege. I try to help those who have not benefited from such privilege.
How? Hold on. Let's pursue this for a moment. You say, this is actually very important because there's a psychology here, right?
To answer your question, I'll start in high school. I mean, do people want to hear this, or do we?
Educated. Go ahead. Tell it. Let them know.
Look, let me say where I'm going with this, because I think you're...
All right, well,
too bad.
all of which is to say, it's not like I picked anyone out to help based on the color of their skin, but I was a tutor for people who tended to be low income when I was in high school. I suppose that would be one direct answer to your question, because oftentimes disparate educational opportunities are grounded in disparate economic systems, or systems that produce disparate economic outcomes. So that's one way that I would combat it on an individual level.
All right. Here's what I'm getting with this, okay? One of the benefits of a good education of reading people like Nietzsche is you begin to understand how deep the human desire is for moral self-exculpation. Moral self-exculpation. Now, you say, and I didn't say this, you said this, I'm a beneficiary of illicit white privilege, okay?
Illicit?
Well, isn't all white privilege illicit? Is it deserved?
Well, in this current system, there is legality.
Illicit means immoral.
Okay. Then
immoral white privilege.
Yeah.
Okay. So then if I were to say to you, there are surely many deserving minorities who would like to come to Amherst but have the inherited disadvantage of American history. Therefore, since you are an acknowledged beneficiary of illicit privilege, would you be willing to step aside voluntarily, putting your own moral mouth where your self-proclaimed virtue is, and give your seat, not my seat. I realize you may be super generous with other people's advantages and favor affirmative action, so other white kids who apply to Amherst are turned away to open spaces for minorities. But I'm not talking about you acting out your virtue on them. I'm talking about you acting out your virtue on you.
In response to that, again, what you're trying to demonstrate is that everyone's hypocritical. As someone once said, that we're all dirty up to our arms, right? We're not all perfect. None of us is perfectly morally consistent. Now, I've said absolutely nothing about affirmative action. The fact is that I believe everyone in this room is hypocritical to some degree, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive for a more just and equitable system entirely. There have been points in my life in which I have given up some of the privileges with which I have been endowed simply because I realized that it wasn't the right thing to do. At the same time, I think everyone needs to survive, and that we understand that we exist in an imperfect system, and that we have to conduct our business in such a way as to not only adhere to our moral standards, but to the standards imposed upon us by the system in which we live. And I think that we have to be generous to people in their efforts to not be hypocritical and to do their best, but I don't think that we should totally throw away the idea that we shouldn't have those standards at all. So that's my response to you, but I would still like a response to my question. question regarding the inequity that I talked about with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. That is wealth that is passed down, and it's documentable wealth. The same way that the wealth created, or the wealth stolen as a product of slavery, was also documentable wealth. We have numbers that demonstrate precisely how much wealth was stolen, and that's money that in some way could be given back. Now, if we're saying that it's absolutely impossible to give that money back because it's too hard to trace, we'd have to give money to the African tribes, we'd have to give money to people who no longer exist, that's absolutely fine, but we have to understand that we haven't really come to terms with that injustice that's been perpetrated, and if we are admitting that no one is perfectly entitled to absolutely everything that their ancestors had stolen from them, then we also have to accept that there are people today who benefit from the fact that their parents and grandparents profited from this immoral system, and the way to deal with that is with a social safety net that enables everyone to thrive. I'll leave you there.
Now, guys, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll see that I use the following meme quite a lot.
We're a little more progressive and ahead of the curve here in San Francisco.
And sometimes I get in trouble for using these memes and using this lowbrow humor, but that's just my sense of humor, guys, so not sorry. But the reason why I use this is because it's so damn accurate. South Park freaking nailed the snooty, elitist, highbrow attitude. And funnily enough, that clip obviously makes fun of San Francisco, which is exactly the place that is currently looking at giving reparations to the tune of $5 million per person, whilst they're in a homeless crisis. Gotcha. But the fact of the matter is that these people love the smell of their own farts, and they love the sound of their own voice, and they love to sit around in little orgiastic circles and virtue signal about how they did some tutoring in high school to combat economic disparities, and about how the government needs to do something about reparations, and about how they acknowledge their white privilege, but they are using it to be champions for the causes of minorities, you see. Yes, they may be the most privileged people to ever exist in the history of the earth ever, but really, they're heroes and they're champions of the oppressed. And this can best be summarized by the following scene. Jokes aside, guys, this is a smart dude. His ideas are poo, but he has a solid grasp of the English language, he's pretty articulate, and has serious potential. But unfortunately, he's at a college where he's been indoctrinated by silly, bitter professors. And this is the guy that, if he's not careful, will become a professor himself. Unless, of course, he comes to his senses, grows up a little bit, and applies his intelligence to the real world. And I've known a few people like this, and it's actually pretty sad. Like, they could be real problem solvers. Now, let's watch Dinesh put some serious combos together and start putting hands on this man. And afterwards, I'm going to break this down play by play.
The core of the American system, this will actually answers your question directly, is that what do we do about the conquest ethic of the past? And here there are two options. There are two options. One option is we establish equal rights under the law. That was the solution of the civil rights movement. That we have had race-based discrimination, we've had racial hierarchy. Let's stop. Let's treat people according to the color of this, according to the content of their character. Equal rights under the law. Equal rights under the law. The other option, which you're defending, is you could essentially call it, let's correct for history. Let's correct for history. Let's try to find out who are the people in possession of stolen goods, and let's return it. Now, the first thing I'm trying to say is, this is a hugely controversial principle because it actually involves wrecking the freedom of a free society. You basically have to put it frankly, if we were to carry that out, go into people's homes and take their stuff. Take their furniture, take their cars. You don't seem to have even the guts to do that. You don't have the moral self-confidence to do it yourself. It may be, if I am advocating a rule of social justice and I'm advocating it for the whole society, before I persuade everybody else, let's say I'm a Christian and I believe everybody should give 10% of their wealth to help the poor. And I go, you know what? The Bible says this, the Bible says that, everybody should give 10% of their wealth to help the poor. And somebody says, Dinesh, are you giving 10% of your wealth? And I'm like, actually, no. but I did do some tutoring. And you go, wait a minute, aren't you advocating? Aren't you saying that there is a moral duty to do this? Why don't you do it? Before you convince us, you do it. And you're like, I don't think I should do it because society is extremely complex, and I don't think I should do it unless everybody else does it. No. Either you believe in it and you do it. Once you've done it, you might impress us. And then you might convince the rest of us that our wealth is also ill-gotten. But you can't do it. And I'm not trying to indict everybody of hypocrisy, only you. Because you're the one who said, I'm the beneficiary of illicit privilege. So you're a really good starting point, because I'm asking, if you're in possession of stolen goods, why aren't you willing to return them? So that's why fundamentally I see your charity. You know, during the Civil War, there was a guy who goes, I'm very happy to give, I've given 3 cousins to the war and I'm ready to sacrifice my wife's brother. That's basically your ethics. You're willing to have social justice if other people pay, but you're not willing to pay. So that's the problem. And that's the problem with the progressivism that marches behind social justice while protecting its own privileges. You know how you said, we all have to survive. Really? You have to be at Amherst to survive? You don't have to be at Amherst to survive. You have to be at Amherst to benefit. You have to be at Amherst because you're getting opportunities at this college that many other people are not getting. So if you say you believe in equal opportunity, you're a hypocrite, because you are taking advantage of opportunities unavailable to others. But for you, this hypocrisy is fully justified because you are militating on behalf of the poor. But if you are against privilege, this college is privilege. So there's a glaring hypocrisy, and you will never turn your moral mirror on yourself to say, what am I doing about it? That's my point. For you, society should act before you do, to enforce your moral code. Let's take a couple more questions.
He did not hold back and was spitting pure facts, and he did a phenomenal job of what I like to refer to as blocking off the exits. You see, somebody who's a good debater can attack and demolish certain points, but somebody who's an elite debater will simultaneously be able to think of the strongest rebuttals to their arguments on the fly and be able to attack and demolish them in sequence. This is high-level mental jiu-jitsu, and it requires you to always be a few steps ahead. And like I said, I refer to this as blocking off the exits, and ideally you want to be able to block off all the exits so they kind of have nowhere to go, and that's exactly what Dinesh did there. And if you watch that back, you'll see that process unfold. But you see, in order to be able to block off the exits, guys, you've got to first bring them into the right room. And Dinesh did this with a few of his earlier questions. He made this student admit that he was the beneficiary of not only white privilege, but illicit white privilege, and pointed out that he'd basically done nothing about it, which makes him look like a hypocrite. And then he pointed out the historical complexities of mankind and a few other points, which led to him eventually being able to block off those exits. And this strategy of being calculated and a few steps ahead is much more effective than running in with your hands up and trying to get a first round KO. And also it allows for proper dialogue and for your opponent to be able to say their piece. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. And as usual, find me on socials, guys. Hit those links in the bio if you want to come and join me on Instagram, Twitter, all of those fantastic destinations, locals, sign up to my email list. And if you guys want to watch another video, click right here. Until next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.